Welcome, welcome. We are at half past the hour here locally, 3:30 in the afternoon. I think we'll get started. We have a very tight agenda because we canceled on Friday's meeting and we pulled it forward to this meeting. So we're just going to jump right in here and get started. We really don't have any time to spare in order to get through everything. We brought the two presentations from Friday up. So this is registration protocols extensions. And Antoine here on my left, your right, and I'm Jim Galvin, and welcome to the IETF. You have hopefully by now seen the Note Well messages several times. This one is primarily a reminder that this is a standards body. Your work here is essentially part of the system now, and it is public. So when you're here and you're in the room, you need to keep all of that in mind. And of course, our responsibility is to treat each other with respect and dignity. And if you have any issues with that, we do have an ombuds team that one can talk to. The Note Really Well is just an additional emphasis on treating people with dignity and respect. And pointing that out, it also applies on the mailing list as well as in this meeting and at any other IETF related function when you're a part of that. And then of course we have our Code of Conduct guidelines. This should be reasonably known to everybody, reasonably common sense, but I know in the heat of the moment we can sometimes forget, and it is important to be respectful of everyone and to show some kindness whenever we're working, especially at the mic and messaging. Okay, so agenda bashing. Our agenda is reasonably pro forma in terms of the major sections, so there really just shouldn't be any surprises here. What we did is section 6 here, the new work presentations came forward from Friday, so that's been added to the end of this meeting. Turns out we had that time, the end of our admin meeting. So assuming that there's no bashing, no one has jumped up or jumped into the queue here, we'll just move forward. We've already done most of the welcomes and introduction. Document management is just our opportunity to remind people that we really do like document shepherds. In fact, in particular, people who've never done it before are especially welcome. It's a good way to get engaged with IETF process, sort of understanding that side of things, and that's a good thing too, as well as the technical introduction to the work that's going on. So please do volunteer to be a document shepherd. We do have a couple of documents that don't have document shepherds. That's all visible if you go to the data tracker. We should probably include a list here now that I think about it on this slide. We'll do that in the future. I think there's one document that doesn't have one. There's at least one, but anyway. NoteScribe, please, anyone can get into the notepad and you can put anything in there that you want to put, clarify any comments that are made. Rick Wilhelm has graciously agreed once again to make sure to capture all actions and other key points in the notepad. But please do review that and make sure that you're satisfied with whatever gets recorded there and add any other notes that you think are important. Okay, so now on to how many published RFCs we have. Well, none this time around, but we do have quite a few that are in the ISG or further along in the process. So I'm hoping that we're going to see quite a list here come the next meeting or two, since all of that should close out at that time. So that would be great. Looking at the RFC editor queue, these are things at the tail end of the process. And of course, we do have the EPP mapping for DNS time to live values. Gavin Brown is the principal author on that one. He has a follow-up document, the RDAP version of the DNS time to live, so that you can query to see what the registry has in it. But he has made it clear that he's not going to work on that document until this one moves along, which I think is a great plan. Got to manage your time and responsibilities. Moving on now to what actually is with the IESG. We have 4 documents that are in the IESG process at this time. And we do have one document here, which we're going to spend a little time on, the RDAP RAR search. The best practices for delete is just waiting for our area director to do some follow-up here to move that along. The RDAP extension for GeoFeed is in IETF last call, so that will move along as soon as that completes. And the internationalized email addresses is also waiting for the area director, Ori, to complete a write-up and move that along. That, of course, is a document which has been around for an unfortunately long period of time. But, you know, I think we're going to be good there. It's a very important and document for internationalization. Okay. I'd like to call on Tom Harrison. Do you want to bring up his slides? Yep, you're doing that. Okay. And we will walk through this. Tom has had quite some experience here with his IESG review and other discussions. He's going to tell us about that. And you'll give him this too? You want to do your own slides? Oh, okay. Well, oh, he's. Okay, you're all set.
Good. So just some really quick updates here out of the last call discussion. The first one is the previous version of this document had a series of link relations defined, but they were quite generic. The feedback we got was it's not a good idea to define generic link relations in a document like this, which is quite protocol specific. The suggestions we got were either to spin off a separate document in another group to handle that, or just to make them RDAP specific. So we made them RDAP specific by prefixing them with RDAP dash. The second part, we had these link relations for status filtering on up and top hierarchy searches. The feedback there was not to define compound link relations, but to compose them together. So we dropped those out. And we now have an RDAP active link relation to be used in conjunction with the RDAP up and RDAP top relations. There was a question about the trailing domain label wildcard search, which is part of the search syntax in RFC 9082, which this document refers to. But this document doesn't have any searches on domain labels. So we just added some text to make it clear that it's not necessary to support that. At least in the context of this document. And the last part was about the document being entirely in terms of IPv4 and whether it was worth adding some text about IPv6. We thought it was implicit that IPv6 needed to be supported as well, but we added some text just to make that completely clear. As far as adding v6 examples in, the whole interface is in terms of addresses and prefix lengths. There's nothing v4 or v6 specific about these searches, and quite a bit of the text already, quite a bit of the document already is taken up with defining the v4 hierarchy. So replicating that for v6 doesn't seem worth the trouble. And that's it, thanks.
Any questions or comments from anyone? I'm not seeing any hands going up. Well, this is fabulous. You're getting us ahead of schedule. Can't be beat. Oh, Gavin's got his hand up. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Gavin's got his hand up. Go ahead, Gavin. And if you're talking, we're not hearing you. Sorry, Gavin, still not hearing you.
Hey, can you hear me now? Is that better?
There you go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Great, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. So on the topic of IPv6 examples, I understand the hassle that will be involved in updating the document to include them. But I think thinking about this from a client implementer point of view, I think if you don't see IPv6 there, you're going to look primarily at the examples, and you're not necessarily going to read the text. And I think it would be misleading to client implementers if they don't see IPv6 examples. It doesn't have to be like one for everything, but maybe just one IPv6 example in the document might not be a bad idea.
Yep. Okay, we can do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. I hope you heard that. Seems like he agreed with you. All right. Back to our slides here. And actually, I believe and Antoine's just asking me if any other authors want to come up and say something. I don't think there's anything to be said here. Their documents are all with the ISG. I'm happy to. We have another minute here if anybody wants to say anything or ask a question. But okay. So with that, we will move on to the next section here, which will be existing work. And at this point, I will turn this over to my co-chair.
Okay, now it's up to me. So we'll we'll go over our existing work. We have 7 documents in our current queue, and we'll briefly go over them and ask the authors if they have any updates to share. Please keep it brief. We have like 2 minutes for every document. The first one is versioning in RDAP. James Gould, do you have anything to say there? I see that you're in the queue. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're starting to look at working on the 03 draft. The first item is related to the existing use of the bear extension identifier. We were thinking about using the underbar data for the versioning property. So we wanted to bring that up on the mailing list as well, since it seems to be frowned upon to use a bear extension identifier. We are going to add some language related to the semantic versioning section on the reason for the semantic versioning. We also, there's an open question related to adding additional metadata in the help response. And there was discussion at the last IETF related to adding support for the temporal versioning type. There was some discussion on the mailing list, and there did not seem to be much support for doing that at this point. So we're not looking to add the temporal versioning type. And finally, Mario is going to be taking the pen to make the updates to the 03 version. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. Anybody have any questions? If not, then we'll go to the next document. RDAP extensions with extensions media type. Are you sure you put the right authors there? Andy, yes, Dip, anything to comment there?
So the extensions media type, where we need to, so Pavel did some measurements, I guess is the way to put it. And it seems that our notion that current servers may misinterpret putting in a parameter on the current media type may not hold water. So we need to just validate his work, and then that would basically kind of drastically change this draft. So that's where we're at with that one. With the next one, which is the RDAP extensions, and James Gould kind of alluded to this thing about the bear identifiers. So I think if you read the current draft, it's quite complicated in all the rules that are expected to be followed. And so I put on the mailing list, hey, maybe we should just simplify this and do things like get rid of bear identifiers. And so far, the feedback I've gotten has been, Pavel's saying, no, I want to keep them. And I think Scott wants to get rid of them. I don't know. I wasn't really clear. But we would welcome any input on how to make this draft much easier to read. I have a fear that if it gets to the IESG in the current state, it's going to get all sorts of discusses on it just because of the way we have this extremely complicated set of rules. So.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody, any questions about these two documents? If not, we'll move over to the next one, JS Contact in RDAP. Mario, I think you're online. Do you have any comments to make? Please go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. We just changed the document to avoid the bare extension identifier. So we changed the extension identifier, and as a result, the response member, including the JS contact card. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mario. Any questions to Mario on his stuff?
So, Mario, this is Jim Galvin. Just one question to you. We are waiting for you to submit the experiment and the definition of success of the experiment to add to the document. Just want to, okay, you're nodding your head, so that's fine. Just want to remind you that that's what we need to advance the document. Thanks.
Okay. Yes. I provide it as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Then, RDAP extensions for RPKI registration data. Jasdeep, Andy, who wants to go?
Hi, Jasdeep Singh. So just a quick FYI, per the suggestion primarily from Antoine, we today presented it, this draft, in the CIDR-Ops working group, which is the RPKI working group. And I think Scott Hollenbeck had also mentioned that we need to leverage RPKI expertise as we take on this work. So I just wanted to report that it was quite well received. So that's encouraging. There were certain comments which came back, which I can share with the group on the mailing list. But overall, so far so good. Thanks.
Thank you, Jasdeep. Any questions on this one from everybody? Nope. Then move on to the next word. EPP over HTTPS. Who wants to say something about it? Is it you, Mario?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick update. The draft has been renamed as to be a working group document. We can add the registration to the EPP extension registry. Gavin Brown has kindly volunteered to be the document shepherd. We are looking for additional review and feedback. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Any questions on that one? If not, then next one, EPP over Quick. And that will be James Gould, I think, commenting. James, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to be mirroring what Mario said on the HTTPS draft, that it was updated to be a working group document, number one. We're going to be looking to add the registration of the EPP extension registry to address the discussion on the charter to ensure that it exactly matches the intent in the charter. Zaid Albana has graciously accepted to be the document shepherd. And as Mario said, we're looking for reviewers and feedback from the working group. So please do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. And I have Paul in the queue, probably with some questions. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, Paweł Kowalik, the Nick. Actually, the question was to the first one, but
Yeah,
the tool was too slow,
ahead.
but actually applies to both of them. So if these two extensions are registered in the EP extension registry, does it mean that they would be also changing the output of the RDAP conformance array and the responses? This just
So do you have the question?
this was the question. Is it expected that the identifier
Is it
would
for
be
Mario or is it for James?
for one of the authors?
One of the authors.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mario or James, could you please reply to that? James in the queue, go ahead.
No. This would not, since these are transports and not a packet protocol extension, so it would not be applicable. Thanks.
And then, thank you, James. Then I would like to make a comment. It was raised already that we might have to do some charter changes, and the chairs have a proposal for you, and we will deal with that in the any other business section to have a proposal. So you have the clicker is here. Oh, now I need to know how to do this. Then we come to new work presentations. And we first have a presentation by Gavin on efficient RDAP referrals. Let me get up your slides, Gavin. Then I first have to get the clicker away. Do you want to have control of the slides, Kevin?
Yes, please, if that's possible.
Okay, then I will pass you the slide control. Go ahead.
Thank you. Got it. Thank you, everyone. So this is a proposal that's been brought to the working group before. My kind of time management means that I haven't been able to really push it too much, but I think I'm now in a position with my time availability that I can take this further. So I want to bring it to the working group for consideration. So just to explain, the basis for this proposal. It seems that the vast majority of RDAP usage is coming from automated systems that are taking zone files and other data sources and then using that as a dictionary to retrieve our registration data in bulk. Something like I think current monthly query rate for the GTLDs is 8 billion queries. That's more than one per person in the world. So we don't have 8 billion people on the planet doing RDAP queries. So there's a lot of automated processing happening. We also have in the GTLD space the concept of registry and registrar RDAP records, where the registry RDAP record is essentially a copy of what the registrar holds. And that means that primarily people consuming this data are more interested in what's in the registry than they are in the registrar than they are in the registry. And that's especially true for TLDs that implement a minimum public data set like Common Net and others that are announced plans to transition to that model. But in order to get that registrar record, the client has to query the registry server and take the URL from the related link in the links property of the record. So what does that look like? In the happy path, where you're talking to a registry server that either has a cached record for what you're asking for, or it has a hot cache where it's generating records up front so that they're there and can be served from cache. You have this sequence diagram where the client requests the record from the server gets it from its cache, sends it back to the client parses it, and then using the URL that it gets from the response, it then sends a query to the registrar server to get the answer back. That's great. That's the optimum process for doing this. But in the case of a cache miss, or where the registry server is generating the RDAP record on demand, it looks more like this. So the client sends the request to the server. Perhaps there's a cache and there's a cache miss, so the lookup fails, the cache miss. Then the application server has got to generate that record by going to its database, and retrieving all of the data, assembling it into an IDAP response. And depending on how well optimized that is, that could involve multiple round trips to the database in order to assemble the information into the IDAP response. Then it needs to go into the cache for subsequent record lookups, and then goes back to the client. And then the client does what it has to do already, which is parse that JSON, extract the link, and go to the registry IDAP server to get the record that it wants. This is all well and good, but it's suboptimal because firstly, cache hit rates are quite low. In my experience from working at a registry, our cache hit rate on our IDAP service was in the 20 to 30% rate because the typical IDAP client is sending, each query is unique. It's sending a query for A.com, and then it's sending a query for B.com, and then it's a query for C.com. And so you don't get a very high cache rate. And so unless the registry is operating a hot cache, a lot of these queries are being generated on demand, which means that a lot of the work is being done to satisfy the request, but the client is actually not interested in most of it. Most of it gets thrown away. The client spends time waiting for the server to do things that it turns out actually the client doesn't care about. It's not really interested in anything except that registrar URL. So this is a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted CPU, and a lot of wasted bandwidth. I did some calculations based on the monthly reports for the GTLDs over the last year or so. The average monthly query volume is about 5 billion queries across all the GTLDs. The average round trip time, at least from me sitting where I am, is about 1,000 milliseconds from a thick server, about 400 milliseconds from a thin server, and about 8,000 bytes from a thick server versus 2.3 kilobytes from a thin server. If you work all that out, we have clients, IDAP clients, collectively spending 1,902 months per month waiting for IDAP responses, 32.4 petabytes of data, most of which is thrown away. And as we see IDAP query volumes grow because WHOIS is being sunsetted, adoption of IDAP is increasing. This is not going to get better. So here's a proposal for a more efficient IDAP referral method. The client sends a head request to the registry server. When the server sees a head request, it knows that it only has to determine whether or not the object is available, exists, and what the sponsoring registrar is, so that it can then construct a URL to go into the response. So at most, it's a single round trip to the database to get that information. And obviously that can be cached as well. The response back to the client is just the HTTP status, message, and a few headers. There's no body because it's a head request. And then the client can extract the URL from the head request and then use that to go to the registrar server to get the registrar record. So, and this explains that. In terms of how this looks to the client, this is functionally equivalent to a 301, 302 redirect, because the request, the response is extremely small. The URL it needs is in a header somewhere, and there are some performance benefits. Obviously, JSON parsing is not particularly intensive, so the benefit is marginally better than the happy path because it only needs to extract the URL from the link header rather than from the JSON body. And there's also a fallback. So if the header isn't, if the headers aren't present in the response, it can, the typo here, it can fall back to get, to go and get the full record and then follow the referral there. And obviously clients that keep a track of the IDAP conformance properties of the IDAP servers they talk to can remember whether or not a server supports this approach to referrals, and therefore can use head when it knows that the server is going to give it a useful answer, and maybe use get by default unless it knows that. So what does the document do? It does two things. It firstly describes how to transform an IDAP link object into a link header field. This is obviously based on existing specifications for these things. The link object in RDAP is based on the syntax and metadata of link header fields in the HTTP specifications. So you can take one of the examples from the RFC, the RDAP RFC, and turn it into something that looks like this, where the URL is encoded in these angle brackets, and then the other metadata, the title, the relation, and the type are in sort of key value pairs. And then a conformance server includes these link headers in responses to head requests, and also the appropriate token in the IDAP conformance array. So this is potential example of what the performance benefits might look like. So most RDAP servers don't seem to have been optimized for head requests, but you can see you can see in the data, the round trip data, those that have and those that haven't. So the majority haven't, and that's all the big spike at sort of between 675 and 750 milliseconds. But there's a smaller spike at around 450 to 525 milliseconds, and those are the IDAP servers that are optimized for head. And obviously, if we had RDAP servers implementing the specification, you'd see more of these head requests coming in at the lower round trip time rather than the faster round trip time, because they would be optimized for speed. So questions for the working group. My co-author and I think this is a real problem. The question is, does the working group agree? And if there is equivocation on that, is there a possibility that we might use an experimental status? Modular, with one caveat, which is that an experimental status RFC would be difficult to deploy in a GTLD sort of environment. So that's one thing to consider. So, questions?
Thank you, Kevin. We have time for questions. Christian, you're first.
Hello, Christian Zimdenek. Kevin, you mentioned that the link header is only present in the head request. What is your opinion on having these also in the GET request?
So the HTTP spec says that any of the headers that appear in the head request should, with the BCP14, should also appear in the GET, and the idea is that they would be the same. But there is a carve out, which is that things like length doesn't have to be, and so we would have to go on the advice of the HTTP people, I think, on whether we would require the link headers to be also in the GET. I think the version of the draft that's currently published does require both head and GET because of this this requirement in the HTTP spec about being in both. But it may be that the rationale for just using the head or using them in head is sufficient to keep the HTTP people happy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Q.
Q Meisel, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, although speaking with my not work registrar hat on. I think, yes, this is a problem that's worth solving. I quite like the solution you've come up with. It's a relatively, neat use of HTTP. I support further work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Q. Then we have James.
Thank you. Jim Galvin speaking as a participant in the working group. I just want to say that I do think this is a problem worth solving, and I do like this solution. Thanks.
Next one up.
Hi, Jasdeep. So I'll echo Q and Jim. I think this is a good problem to solve, especially the data Gavin shared. If you can go, just one minor comment. If you go back a couple of slides where the RDAP conformance thing was. Yeah, I think just a very, very minor suggestion that I think we are looking from the extensions draft, we are discouraging underscores now. So something to consider. And one food for thought, not to digress, are there other interesting use cases for using the head method? I don't know, but this draft should certainly stay focused on the problem you're trying to solve, but that may be worth considering. So.
Okay, thank you, Jasdip. Mario.
My question is about which kind of links this draft consider. Because we have also links included in notices, in remarks. So I guess that these links, those links are not addressed by this draft, correct?
So the draft doesn't currently state what links should be included in the header. I think it'd be better for the document itself to not say anything about that, and that could be a matter of the server to decide, or policy to decide about what links are present.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you're next.
Paul Kowalik. Yeah, so it's, I think, wonderful work solving a real problem. It's really supported. I just have one concern, whether there is enough motivation for the clients to switch the behaviors, because the saving is mostly on the server side, as you indicated, and the clients are mostly lazy in their implementation. So if they will have to differentiate between servers supporting it and not, they will have just one implementation doing get like before. I would rather suggest to use the same link header in both get and head, just to keep it consistent, and maybe also motivate the clients to use this one even if they do get. And in this example, there is a title, so which it seems that for this use case, just getting the link to the registrar and maybe reducing the size even more of this link header could be a good option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the example here is just a literal transcription of the example in the RFC into the syntax in the header. On the first point, I do think, as I said before, like most RDAP usage is coming from automated systems, where if you're doing thousands, millions of RDAP queries, these very small deltas in the round trip time do add up. So I think there is an incentive for clients to implement this once they know about it.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ruth.
Ruth Trevor-Allen, Nominat, but speaking for myself, I completely agree that this is a problem that needs solving, and great piece of analysis, by the way. Pleased to see that data is being used for something. I just wondered if you have any ideas why people are going to the registrar lookup. Is there some information that's not in the registry RDAP that they need?
Yeah, so for registries, GTLD registries that implement what's called the minimum public data set, what we historically called a thin registry model, so .com and .net, which are obviously two of the largest TLDs, none of the contact information is in the responses from the registry. So if you want to look that up, you have to go to the registrar. With the new, speaking again, just in the ICANN GTLD world, with the new registration data policy, more and more GTLD registry operators are planning, or have announced plans, to transition to a thin model. And I can see at least one in the room if he wants to raise his hand. And so there is going to be, by default, more and more of an interest from the client in what the registrar record looks like, rather than what the registry record looks like. There are cases where you need to see the registry record, or where you want to see both so that you can compare. But obviously this specification doesn't do anything to stop that from happening.
Okay, then last in the queue, Maarten.
Martin, SHDN. As said before, this is definitely something that can be fixed and needs to be fixed. And also, I was thinking, did you also consider maybe including something like an E tag in the response for caches?
That feels like a server implementation thing. I mean, I think as an IETF document, we shouldn't necessarily. We could maybe advise that those things might be considered. I don't know how much head requests are cached though. So whether get responses are cached, but I don't know about head.
I think
so. An E tag in a head response wouldn't necessarily be cached.
I think head can be cached, but I'm not sure if it is cached in the real world. But okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And to give you some help, Gavin, I want to propose a show of hands who think this is a good idea to answer one of your 3 questions that you had at the end. So you could all go to your Meet Echo. And I see nobody that doesn't think this is a good idea. So, okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you.
And let's go to the next presentation. Let's first get my slides back. Share slides. And the last presentation that we have, at least from the participants, is Victor, who is going to talk about OutCosec. Victor, do you want to take control of the slides?
Yes, if I may.
Yeah, okay, then there you have it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, thanks for chairs and working group for letting me present. This is basically a coming back because we get feedback last time and we want to kind of address these feedback. So to give you a context, OffCodeSec is trying to increase the security by using cryptography in OffCode, but make it backward compatible. And the goal was to allow the cryptography to specify the gaining party. And then with the feedback last time, we will focus on gaining registrar and use cryptography for verification and make it fully backward compatible. And there are, I think, 3 main pieces of the feedback last time. First is the challenge about domain slamming, and this was raised, I believe, Scott and Rick. Losing registrar must maintain the ability to deny a transfer. So our proposed revision would be even when OffCodeSec is cryptographically validated, losing registrar should still be able to decline domain transfer. So that's the first to address the main feedback. And the second feedback is about crypto signing. I think it was raised by Judy. Judy noted most registrars cannot handle cryptography process. And at the time, we proposed multiple models, including model A, which is registrar signing, and model B, which is registrar signing. So in our proposed revision of V01, we're dropping the other signing models, only keeping it simple, skipping the model B registrar signing for the RFC scope, and also emphasize that registrar signing is optional. Registrars who don't upgrade to this code sec can fall back to use their current auth code, maintaining backward compatibility. And the third one is about algorithms, questions raised about which public key cryptography algorithm is being used. I think it was Pavel. And so we propose to begin use widely adopted cryptography in DNS, which including RSA with SHA-256. This allows us to maintain backward compatibility for signing and also allow fully future extensions. And the question we have for the working group is, what would be a good way for distribution of public keys if we were to pursue this RFC? One of the things we think of is we can directly use the DNSSEC of the registrar, which is well in their capability of managing because they have to provide that to their user. So that's the question. I think that's it. That's the end of the slides.
Okay,
Thank you.
Victor. Then we have questions in the queue. You go first.
Q Meisel, Max Planck Informatics. So kind of just, what am I trying to say here? On finding public keys, this is a bit difficult because if you want to use the DNS, then you need some mapping. You need to be able to figure out what DNS name the gaming registrar uses. And the registrar needs to be able to easily explain to their registrar who they want to transfer it to. That most of the people transferring domain names have absolutely no idea what they're doing. They just want to say to customer service, hey, I want to move my domain to this other company. And then you have to somehow figure out how does this map to a domain name, and then maybe you can find a public key. A suggestion I would make is, and I know Nominet implements something similar where you can query over EPP all the registrars, because you need to, in Nominet, you need to push a domain to someone else. So you need to know who can I push it to, and then you can give someone a nice drop down of maybe with a search box, if I want to move it to this company. Maybe that would be a decent way to do it, to have a just hello EPP server, give me a list of public keys.
Thank you, Q. I will look into that options.
Okay, next one is my fellow co-chair, Jim.
Yes, Jim Galvin speaking as a participant in the working group. Just a quick question for you. I presume that you're implementing this, and maybe just asking a confirmation of that. Are you aware of anyone else that's moving forward with this?
I think there are general sentiments that I've talked to other people when they notice that auth code currently is still mostly not cryptographically signed a signature. So when so they're welcoming this this idea, but it takes multiple parties to implement them to begin using it. So that's why we are proposing a backward compatible solution where for people who are implementing it, they can begin to use it with more security, better security. But for registrars that are not upgrading soon, they can still fall back to use their current approach without any breakage.
Okay, thank you. Next in the queue, Paul.
Hi.
Hi, Paul Kolik. So I have a question. I haven't had a chance to read the new version of the draft, but if the registrant is not signing, let's say, the transfer request, so who is in this case? Because I'm missing a part of picture. So
Yeah,
what's the
model?
process?
Yeah, thank you. We haven't published the V01. This was mostly to propose these changes. Then, if we receive feedback, we will incorporate that into the V01. So that's soon to be published. But to answer you, in this model, it would be the losing registrar to sign the transfer to a specific game registrar. So registrant in this model doesn't sign, but the registrar signing it.
So the losing registrar would be signing, and the winning registrar would be just verifying the registry will be verifying the signature from the losing registrar.
Yes, and in fact, any parties who is observing this could verify it. For example, the registrant who is trying to move their domain from one place to another place. If they have been given the full information, they can also cryptographically verify it. It's just to mention that even if that signature is validated, a losing registrar will still be able to decline the transfer down the road. But at least now with this capability, every party can validate and reduce the chance to query the validity of the auth code.
Okay, but the losing registrar will be designating who will be the winning registrar, like by signing this token or whatever it is.
Yes, and usually they get this from their registrant.
Well, usually, well, there are push and pull transfers, but in case of push transfer, there's no issue because it's push, so it's just pushed to another account. And if there is pull transfer, sometimes it's wished that the losing registrar has no idea where it's transferring to. So just to let you know.
Yeah, I think in this case, it at least will begin to work in a push situation, and then pull seems to be more capable. A pull EPP transfer could potentially be more of a good fit for down the road when we need registrant signing. But for now, we just want to begin with the registrar signing.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question comes from Jim number 3.
Yeah, there aren't enough Jims in this working group. Thanks, Victor. This is a very interesting idea. I'm kind of worried though about the mention of DNSSEC. I've got a sort of knee-jerk reaction against DNSSEC whenever people suggest it as a solution to a problem, because I think DNSSEC ends up creating more problems than it solves, quite frankly. And in this particular case, there's a contention here, or at least I've got concern, you're going to introduce more moving parts, more complexity, and can make things much more difficult to actually implement in future. I think it's a great idea, sticking keys in the public keys in the DNS is great, but having them backed up by secure DNS is maybe not necessary. And so I would just throw a couple of little points out there. The first one is that there's talk in the DNSOC working group about having different signing techniques in such a case as that it wouldn't necessarily be the registrar who signs his own data. It could be a third party, for example, a DNS hosting provider. And of course, if we've got a DNS hosting provider that's doing the signing, then there's another line of communication in between the registrar and the two registrars and potentially the registry. So I think that potentially could complicate matters. There's another thing that's going on inside DNSOC. They're talking about domain verification techniques. So there's a possibility there are other mechanisms for sticking some kind of authentication token in the DNS for some domain name, and that might solve this particular problem without needing to go down the DNSSEC path. I think your idea's got merit, but I think we need to look a bit more closely about the potential implications of how it gets implemented. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Okay, final comments you want to make, Victor? Question you have to the audience?
No, I'd like to thank the audience for the feedback. And I guess if people who provided feedback before that is mentioned here, including Scott, whether these proposed revision will solve the concern.
Okay, then we thank you for your presentation. I'll take the slide control. And we come to the end of our meeting on the last topic. Let me start to share some slides. And our last topic is the any other business. We're just in time. And the first any other business that we have come from the chairs themselves. Did you put them on the end of the chair slides? Yes, confirm your selection. Why do I always need to do that?
So while he gets us back to the any other business spot, if you downloaded the chair slides earlier than an hour ago, you won't have these in your little slide deck. So you might want to go get another set. We had some recent discussion going on about all of this. Longtime participants in this working group will know that when the working group was first started, we definitely wanted to focus on extensions in EPP and RDAP. But along the way, we have always, added some other kinds of related things related to registration protocols, which were not precisely extensions. And one of the interesting things that comes up is every time that we've done that, there's always been a discussion. There's always been a set of people who've asked questions. The area director principally is one person who asks questions, but even people in the working group and elsewhere have come forward and asked whether something is really in scope or not. And this has just happened most recently, even though the working group has adopted the EPP over HTTPS and EPP over Quick, there is still the question of whether or not that work is explicitly in scope, and opinions vary. So there's a missing bit of clarity in our existing charter. So we would like to believe, our chairs here, and we have tacit agreement with our area director, but he's not promising the future. He was okay with us adopting the work, but whether or not it's going to move forward or not is dependent on getting clarity in our charter on the acceptance of this work. So we do have those two documents, and we want to know, it's not a universal acceptance that it's in scope, but do we think that it is? And then, in fact, since we have had this experience over the years in talking to our area director, the idea here is let's clarify in the charter the kinds of things that really should be in scope. And again, this is what's interesting about this working group is usually we like charters to be very specific about what you're doing. So, you always have this question of should you list everything that you might do? But this is the words that I've chosen to use as I think of this working group as kind of a maintenance working group, because we're not making base changes to the spec. We're not changing EPP or RDAP. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why RPP as a separate working group was created, because it really was opening the door for the possibility that the underlying EPP would change. And so, from our point of view, as working group chairs, we didn't want that work in this working group. So, and this down here at the bottom is just a list of a few other documents that we have adopted, only the top 3 of which have actually progressed to being published or are about to be published, but they're not strictly extensions either. So that's just a reminder to us that in fact we have done things that are not explicitly extensions, and we've moved forward with all of that. So this is the why and kind of the what. There's actually this is what our charter says today. Okay, so this is actually the last paragraph. Those last 3 bullets and that last paragraph appear at the bottom of the charter. So the proposal here is to make a very targeted change. The goal is just to treat EPP and RDAP equally, and then open the door for doing things related to those protocols without changing the base protocol specifications. And hopefully that at least makes sense when I describe it. And then we get to consider whether or not the words that are about to be proposed here match that sentiment or not. And so we should have some discussion about that. What's in italics up here is the existing charter, and it's that part of the sentence which is going to change on the next slide. Otherwise, all the rest of that text and the whole rest of the charter stay the same. We're only proposing changing that little bit there. And this is the proposal for what to change it to. And there are 2 things going on here. We change the latter half of that sentence, and then we add a 4th bullet, okay, where we explicitly call out protocol extensions for transporting. Thus, that opens the door for being able to carry the standard EPP and RDAP things in other transports. And so that last bullet explicitly calls into scope the HTTP and Quick usage. And then the words up top there are really just trying to open the door for anything which is related to the use of RDAP and EPP. Anything that falls into that space is eligible to be accepted. But of course, it does say may at the top there. So, sort of the intent is to allow for, area directors and negotiation with the working group to really have some opportunity to say no. But we open the door for eligibility to be considered, and then we use the rest of the process to turn things off or add them. This is under any other business. It really has to go to the mailing list for consideration. We really are just kind of at the end of our hour here, we're at the bottom. I mean, if anybody wants to jump up and say something, I see Andy's got his hand in the queue. So why don't you come up, Andy? And other than that, we'll have plenty of time in the mailing list to talk. Please go ahead, Andy.
So the bottom part where it says protocol extensions for transporting EPP and RDAP, I don't think RDAP should be in there. No one's proposing an RDAP transport. And that would actually conflict with the part up the top where you say no material changes to the internet standards, because that would be a material change to RDAP. Furthermore, for EPP, we would want to restrict it to what is defined in RFC 5730 about what EPP transports are. Otherwise, that includes EPP over carrier pigeon, EPP over, tons of stuff. But EPP actually does define what types of transports are viable for it. The other thing is, and this was mentioned many times in this session today, there are other parts of the charter which say only proposed standards or only standards track. So that precludes all the times we said experimental today. So I think those should be included in the charter as well.
Actually, the bit about experimental, yeah, thank you for that. So maybe we should at least fix that in the rest of the charter. When making this proposal, and I'm the one who put all this together, so I'll take the blame here about this. It really was about trying to minimize the changes, but I think the experimental point is worth considering. What I would ask, Andy, you had talked to me before about what you just said here to the group, but as we take this to the mailing list, it would also be helpful if there's any chance that you might have a suggested alternative to what we could say here to accomplish this. That would be helpful. You don't have to invent it in this moment unless you want to.
I'll put this on the mailing list.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So this is a heads up. We're gonna post this on the mailing list, and then we'll have some discussion there. We'll see what we can get out of that, and then we'll look to declare consensus at some point here after people have had a chance to think about it and move forward. So with that, back to you.
And that we still have, I still see Pavel in the group. Pavel, do you want to comment on this, or do you have any other business? Okay, then go ahead. We have one more, any other business topic.
Yeah, so there's a quick question to chairs and to the group, because we don't have session on Friday and we didn't make too much discussion on the insights of the open drafts that we are working on. Should we consider interim meeting to cover for this?
You can always suggest an interim meeting. Just ask the chairs, right? And we'll organize one. And everybody who's here is also welcome, of course, to join together on Friday in the open slot that we have. But the chairs won't be sitting here.
This was not the question.
Yeah. No, but if you want to have an interim meeting, you can always request an interim meeting with the chairs, and we will accommodate it.
This is why I wanted to also have.
Is there anybody that is interested in an interim meeting at the moment?
What would you discuss at the interim meeting?
Yeah, so basically on the drafts that we have in progress, like extensions drafts, like versioning drafts, there's a lot of open questions that I expected to have discussed during the meeting.
So, I can see the value of having interim meeting, because he had a lot of comments on the extensions draft, a lot. So that may be something worthwhile doing.
Yeah, we just didn't have a slot on the extensions documents this time. Nobody asked for time on our agenda, right? So we want to allocate a time slot to discuss this, but there's somebody who should be asking for time on the agenda, right? The chairs are not going to talk about it. So if you wanted to talk about extensions, you could have asked a slot as well.
Well, I'm not holding the pen for this draft for these drafts, but there is a lot of work open in the pipeline, and
One comment I would make, I think it's important to keep in mind that documents progress when the authors or the editors want to move it forward, which requires the working group to be reviewing documents and making questions. So the same thing applies to a virtual meeting. I mean, sure, the chairs will always support a virtual meeting, but getting to Andy's question, what would be the agenda? So, if as long as there is a group of people who want to get together and they have something to talk about, yes, an interim meeting would be fine. and we can make that happen. But that's the critical thing. Need an agenda, just like we needed for this meeting. That's why we canceled Friday. You know, no one stepped up and wanted to talk about anything. So that's where we were. Okay? Anyway, thank you. It looks like Ari's going to get the last word here.
Yeah, so we're at time, but I just want to say that when the agenda call, for the IETF meeting goes out, that's the time that you should request time, to present. And if you do interims, make sure that you post the agenda for the interim on the mailing list, and you can build the agenda ahead of time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And now we still are like 5 minutes over time, so I give you all your break now. I think it's a drinks break this time. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you to Rick for your notes.